very much, Graham and Bernice. Dale Walkonen and myself, Stuart Scott, we're talking with Graham and Bernice Maxton, who are at the moment in Taiwan. They are in COVID lockdown in Taiwan, but what they've just described to us is a much different world than COVID lockdown in New York or many other places. And I think we decided together that COVID has segregated us into many different worlds, each with their own properties of how this epidemic is playing out. And so we're having a conversation today. Oh, first, I know Graham through his having been, were you executive secretary or?
I was Secretary General.
Graham had been Secretary General of the Club of Rome. And I had some interaction with Club of Rome years ago. And then we became friends afterwards. And Graham and Bernice have just written a really nice book, a short book, easy enough to read in a day and get your head around. And we're talking today about that book. Can you hold up a copy? You have one there with you. Oh,
right here.
There we go. And the title is A Chicken Can't Lay a Duck Egg. And we'd like to talk during the course of our conversation about how you picked that title, what it means. So let's start off right there.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the chicken?
So the title comes from the words of the civil rights activist Malcolm X in the 1960s. And he was fighting for black rights and for human rights. And what he meant when he said a chicken can't lay a duck egg is that a system which is designed to do one thing can only do what it's designed to do. So if the system creates injustice, which is what he was fighting against, then you can't reduce the level of injustice unless you change the system. And that's what we're saying here, that you can't fix climate change or solve our other environmental problems or solve our other social problems with the existing economic system that we have today. The only way we can solve these problems is by changing the system. So a chicken can't lay a duck egg. The existing economic system can't solve our social and environmental problems.
And as we used to say growing up, right on.
COVID is presenting us with an extraordinary opportunity to recognize that societies can shut down, industry can stop, cruise ships can stop sailing, and the world can go on. But when we come out of COVID, how can we maintain that awareness that we don't need to keep polluting our environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think that's probably the danger point in all of this. When COVID hit, we found that it was possible to have people stay at home, for governments to pay them to not go to work, for the airline industry to shut down. And that made us actually feel very hopeful. But now governments and companies and individuals are really pushing to press back down on the gas pedal. And that's really the danger. How do we get people to keep their focus on what's already been started and just continue down that path?
We've got this chance with COVID to do something which we haven't had the chance with for a long time, because people are questioning the system. They're questioning whether or not the way we lived before was working. Now, if this vaccine is developed and suddenly everybody gets cured and we go back to normal, then obviously the chance gets lost. But I think, or we think, that the process is actually going to be much more complicated than that. It's going to be very difficult to get out of this situation for perhaps several years. And the longer it goes on, the more people will question what the system is doing, will question why they're doing it. And governments are behaving particularly badly right now. I mean, they're behaving very incompetently. And that's also encouraging people to realize that perhaps things are not functioning as they should, and that we need to make some fundamental changes.
We actually use the analogy of going on a diet in the book, where, you know, the motivation at the very beginning is really high and everybody intends to do the right thing. And then you get in a few weeks or a few months and you start to get hungry and you start to get kind of tired of everything. And I think we feel that that's kind of where we are at the moment. The human instinct is then actually to go back to what's familiar and what's comfortable. And as people have been in lockdown for several months and they've been tightening their belts, people have had enough. And so the temptation will be to go back now.
Yeah, and it unless they're extremely motivated not to go back, that's the first thing people will want to do. You talk about a couple of industries like NASCAR, things that we need to do. My favorite of those is the cruise ships. We don't need to have them cruising around. They could become hotels and stick just ashore. Maybe to identify the major industries that we need to boycott, and you talk about boycotting a lot as a way of overcoming this.
Yeah, I mean, the focus of our desire to change is really to slow the pace of climate change. I mean, climate change is the number one problem. If we don't fix that, then, you know, I think as Bernice wrote, you know, we're all meatloaf. We're all going to be cooked alive. So climate change is number one. So how do you stop climate change? And that's really quite simple. You have to stop burning fossil fuels. You have to stop deforestation, and you need to reform the agricultural system. Stop burning fossil fuels means not just that we have to restrict the coal, oil and gas industry, but we have to get rid of cars and aircraft and these cruise ships, which are such a menace. And we have to transform the way we live into something which is more sustainable. And we have to do that quickly over the next 10 years if we're really going to make the difference that's necessary. So what we're saying is, you know, 7% fewer cars every year, 7% fewer aircraft, 7% fewer ships. So that in 10 years' time, we've at least cut it down by 2/3. And COVID has helped that process begin. I mean, we are seeing, you know, aircraft numbers dropping dramatically, cruise ships going out of business. I mean, this is all good stuff as far as we're concerned.
But how do you institute that as policy when those holding the reins of government want to go back the other way?
Yeah, so I mean, we do talk about this as well. The danger at this point is that the same people with the same ideas will come in and say, we just need to make a few tweaks. We need to have a few more Teslas. We need to subsidize, you know, a few industries to go a little bit greener. That is not going to cut it. So we talk about removing from power the people that are currently in power and training a group of people to take over with much more radical ideas, with a focus on long-term sustainability and the well-being of the majority of people on the planet, not just in, you know, nationally.
Yes.
I mean, we need to reform our political, our democratic systems. The democratic systems that we have today have been hijacked by a bunch of people who are basically serving the needs of themselves and big corporations. And we need to restore democracy. We need to get people power back so that we can make the changes that are necessary for the majority. And that's what's not happening right now.
Can you describe a little bit how you see that? Now, I would not use the word radical because to me it's not radical. To me it's obvious.
Yeah.
It's radical change, but using the word radical is loaded. Can you explain how that form of government, form of governance, let's say not government but governance, how that would work in your ideal world?
Well, I mean, first of all, we've laid out how we can build a groundswell of opinion to build for change. And then what we've done is we've laid out a framework of what a new sustainable economic system would look like, which would live in balance with nature, which would live in balance with individuals. We'd have to get rid of a lot of the injustices that happen, the inequalities in society. They have to be taken away so that there's no sources of friction and conflict. We'd have to do away with things like money. So we've laid out what a broad framework would look like, but getting there, it's really about building awareness and understanding, so that, because the problem today is it's not a lack of data. The problem is that not enough people understand the need for change. And maybe you can talk a bit about, you know, how we've laid out how we can all play a role in helping others understand.
Mm-hmm. And before we talk about how to motivate people to make change, I just want to put in a precedent there. We do have a precedent, several precedents in how change has been made on a very large scale and how that planning has taken place. Now, back in the 60s, in the 50s, throughout the 80s, there were several examples of how groups of people were trained in order to be ready for when a change in power would come about. The one that I know a little bit about is Indonesia, where in the 1960s, President Sukarno was not favored by particularly the US, but also by the UK. And the CIA spent many years training up people who would then be ready to take over power, to take over the job of running the country. And so we have several examples in the book about how that's happened in the Soviet Union. The post-Soviet Union era was another example, several Eastern European countries as well. So that has been done in the past. So we need to make sure that there are well-trained people to take over control when the cracks in the system become too much to sustain it anymore.
So how will that training be arranged? Again, we're talking now in your imagination of how the future may go. Who would arrange that training?
Is encourage, first of all, people to act by informing their friends, their colleagues, their families, and creating a network of information and a network of politically active people who are going to come together and create some sort of global political alliance to push for change. This has to be a people's movement from the bottom up. And what we've done in the book is lay out exactly what people can do to be part of that, to take things like Fridays for Future or Extinction Rebellion and bring them together into a political force for change. Now, and so we have the same situation with climate change, where we have a lot of people who all think, electric cars or recycling or geoengineering is the solution. And so they can never agree on anything. And what we're saying is, look, have one goal and focus on that goal. And that goal is simply to slow the pace of climate change, to cut fossil fuel use and to make sure that we stop polluting the atmosphere. That's the only goal. And so that is what we're suggesting, to unify these groups and bring them together. But it requires individuals with vision and leadership. And one of the first tasks we've said is the groups that come together have to start identifying individuals who can play important roles. And these people are not in the current political system. They can't be, because the people in the current political system are the problem.
If I can just jump in there as well, one of the things we also say is that everybody will have to be aware of how much resistance they're going to face. Because we know from deep experience ourselves that when you come out with a message like this, people don't thank you for it. Some people thank you, right? But a lot of people, when you start to talk about how serious and how urgent the problem is, they deny it at first, and then as they start to take it on board, they get very angry. And when you start to tell people that what they're doing now is not going to help, then they get even more angry. And so people who want to take this on, who are determined to fight for this, will have to really work on their emotional resilience to be able to cope with that.
One of the things that I just thought while you were speaking was something Naomi Klein said, I believe, that when you take away someone's worldview, you have to have another worldview for them. Because if you're threatening their worldview, as you've described, then they will fight, because that's the way they extract meaning from the universe around them. So we have to build up a different worldview.
And that's
trying to change the school food, which we did eventually. And the lunch ladies were furious because they said, do you think we've been poisoning kids all these years, giving them hot dogs and treats? I don't poison kids, I feed them. And we had to really work hard with them for them to come around to the end where finally they were saying, we're so happy to be giving this new food out. And they felt it was their project. That was the whole critical thing. If it was our project, no. If it was theirs and they understood and they were now doing something good, that's when the change occurred.
Exactly, and what that's why the book is targeted at, and we're wanting to appeal to people in their 20s and 30s, to younger people who I mean, they're going to suffer the worst of the climate change during their lifetimes. That's one reason. But secondly, they're less brainwashed by this economic system, which is forcing us to focus on short-term profitability to make a few people rich. They're more likely to question the system, and we need a new generation of leadership.
Of a minimum income, that nobody starves in the world, that everybody has money. There is money, and the idea of money itself is a kind of a fantasy, as is debt, as you point out, and that people could all have a standard of living that could provide for people, that it's not based on my job, working constantly on a treadmill. It's based on your human right as a person to live. We need to come to that point. It's a very radical idea. It was proposed by one of the candidates, Andrew Yang, in our election in America. And people were shocked. What? Give people $2,000 a month?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, sorry, Dale, I think you hit on something really important there. And it's also not just about having enough money to feed ourselves. What we figured, it's also important for people to feel like they're doing well. One of the really valuable pieces of feedback we got from the Soviet era was that there was often a lack of motivation in the very equal society, or the idea of an equal society, because people didn't feel like there was any value to them, going that extra mile. So if people feel like they're not just subsisting or not just surviving, but actually doing well, and they feel like there's value in their lives and there's meaning to their lives, that's when it starts to become powerful, and that's what makes it sustainable as well.
When I came to my epiphany about why the root cause of climate change, there were two elements. One was, shall we say, the spiritual element, that spiritual, ethical, that we were trying to fill an emptiness, a void in our sense of being, because religions and all of that stuff, we live in a world of science. Excuse my background for going crazy, but the world is going crazy. And the advertising industry was more than willing to help us feel empty and feel that if we just bought the right deodorant or the right shaving equipment and similar things for women, the right, that we would be better, we'd be happy. The other element was that we have a system of money and economics. And economics, and you've heard me say this before more than likely, Graham, economics is not economics. It's neoclassical growth economics, which, through having been hoodwinked 100 years ago, we have learned is called economics, as though there's no other way to play that game. So it's economics. No, it's neoclassical growth economics. And the element of money in particular, which I always I differentiate between capital M money and lowercase money. Lowercase money is the stuff in your pocket. Capital M money is the meme that has taken over our brain patterning and makes us think in certain ways that I need money. I have to go to work because I need money. Money controls us. The way money functions, debt money in particularly, has very powerful. So given those two things, money and economics need to change. And your perspective is more radical than that, or more, shall we say, more extreme than that, that you believe that money has to go entirely. I'm not sure that it does, but how do you see that happening? What's going to function as a medium of exchange, of fair exchange? I mean, I wanted to just do Bitcoin where instead of it being untraceable, every Bitcoin was completely open and everybody knew who had it before.
Yeah. First of all, just back to your question about materialism and the advertising industry making us buy stuff. One of the things one of the analogies we've got is about the need to cross a river. We have to cross this fast-moving river and get to the other side. And what's on the other side is very unfamiliar. And we need to think about the world on the other side as somewhere that's actually quite positive It won't be material. It won't be like the way we live today. It'll be more like the way people lived maybe 40 or 50 years ago, where you don't go and buy a new phone every 18 months. You don't necessarily have a car. You don't go to exotic locations for your holidays. You have 2 or 3, suits or dresses in the wardrobe, not 50. And you get your satisfaction from, I don't know, your religious network or your family or playing golf, or you get your satisfaction in fundamentally different ways from today. Now, I would argue that the people who were alive, adults in the 1960s and 70s, were in many ways happier than many of the people today, because they weren't driven so materially. And so we need to think about a future which is more like that, which could be a much happier future. When it comes to money, I mean, money is the root of so many of our problems: debt, inflation, taxes. I mean, all the things that people don't like. It creates greed and envy, and it creates so much misery in the world. And I mean, it's a very complicated idea but when we've been living with money for centuries. And by the way, money was not created as a medium of exchange. It was created to fight wars. It was created to pay armies to fight wars. It started in a very difficult beginning. But if you think about the world of, I mean, this is maybe a silly example, but it does make the point, I think, the Starship Enterprise with Jean-Luc Picard in the 1980s. Now, everybody on that starship has a role to fulfill. The hierarchy is relatively flat. Everybody is proud of what they're doing. They have a goal, which is exploration and discovery, and they never have to pay for anything. They don't worry about paying their rent or buying their meals. It's all there provided. And I think that's the kind of vision we need to have, where there's a society where everybody has their basic needs met, and they don't have to have money, because money also creates inequality. And so it's that kind of vision that we're talking about.
There's a concept of the shared economy, or the commons, that instead of everyone having a car, there are cars. And we're actually moving toward that as we go to self-driving cars and cities that no longer want to be polluted, and the bike share idea. So, there are beginnings of that concept in our mind that, oh, we don't have to own everything. The "you are what you buy" or what you can buy idea can shift to something entirely different, where you are what you are, what you love, what you share.
And if I can just jump in there, I think one thing we have to do away with is the idea of competition, because it's not just the status symbols and the you are what you buy that creates problems. It's this idea that we're competing with each other to do better. Graham noticed when his son was very young, that as children, they would all try and help each other. When they had the school sports day, they would, start the race, and then, one would go ahead, and then he would realize that he was ahead, and he would look over his shoulder and slow down so that everybody could then come up together. And we have seen countless examples of how children want to help each other, until the point where society and the education system and life teaches them that they have to fight each other. It wasn't always that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just that our modern society has made it so.
This is certainly the emotional impact of our present society is being felt in the suicide rate going up among young people, and the incredible amount of mental health issues and depression that's happening in the people who are in their 20s and 30s. Terror of their cell phone.
And irrepressible. Referring to what you said before about happiness, there actually has been research, and the happiness index, at least in the United States, started going down in the 1950s at the same time that consumerism was introduced. And I believe it was Annie Leonard, who is now executive director of Greenpeace, who presented that in quite a famous whiteboard that she did on the internet, The Story of Stuff.
Yes.
She documents that. So yes, they're directly inversely related. The more consumerism, the more competition, the less you feel valued.